Marriage among the Miao is arranged much the same as among the Chinese, by a matchmaker or go-between, but, unlike the Chinese, the matchmaker mostly comes upon the scene after the young people have shown a decided preference for one another. The young men and maidens do much of their courting quite openly at the musical festivals and at the village fairs. Very often a couple or a group of young people go out for long walks together. It would be well, for obvious reasons, if there were less of that sort of thing. After living for some time among the Chinese, who are nothing if not conventional, and among whom Mrs. Grundy is well-nigh omnipotent, it is surprising and amusing to visit a Guizhou market among the Miao, and see the lads and lasses frolicking with one another on the street and around the stalls. It reminds one of a country fair at home. But sometimes, and not infrequently, the girl's parents object to her lover, and from mercenary motives arrange a marriage without consulting the inclinations of the young people. The price paid for a wife among the Miao is usually from 30 to 60 Mexican dollars. These mercenary marriages nearly always prove a miserable failure and lead to numerous daughter-in-law disputes. Not that those marriages which are the result of mutual liking are always happy. We imagine that many, perhaps one half of the Miao women over 30 years of age, have been married once or twisito men who are now living before they settled down with the man they now call their husband. We know one girl who left her first husband because she did not like him. After her parents had repaid the money the husband's family had expended on the marriage, she married again, and now seems settled and contented with her husband and 2 or 3 children. Another woman we know was betrothed when a girl told a man who left home for a while, and while he was away her parents married her to another. When the man to whom she had been betrothed came back and claimed her, the man who had married her gave her up, and she became the wife of the other. We know another young woman, not yet 30, who is subject to epileptic fits, who has been married half a dozen, perhaps a dozen, times. When her new husband discovers she is subject to these fits, he sends her home again and does not want her. After a marriage has been arranged, a day is fixed for the receiving of the bride. The kinsfolk and friends of both parties are invited, a room is cleared out, sometimes it is the cowhouse, which is really a part of the dwelling house, and seats put all round against the wall for the guests. The guests all make presents to the bridegroom's family, rice, or jars of whiskey, and sometimes silver. These contributions taught our host considerably diminish the cost of the marriage feast. The bride, who walks from her parents' home, escorted by her girl friends all dressed in their best and wearing their silver ornaments, generally arrives during the afternoon. Among the Hua Miao, after the evening meal, the bride and one of her companions lay aside their fine clothes and, taking a tub half full of water, wash the feet of all the guests, beginning with the men. When this is done, they all settle themselves for a night of whiskey drinking and song singing. The guests sing the virtue of their host, praising the kindly way he has received them and the rich food provided for their entertainment. Then the host, or someone on his behalf, replies also in song, belittling the host and grieving over the contemptible style in which the guests have been treated. The legends of the tribe are also chanted one after another, sometimes one voice leading and the others joining in a sort of chorus. Sometimes one party singing interrogatively and another party singing responsively. The feasting, singing, and noise go on for 3 days and nights, at the end of which time the guests depart and the bride, with her companions, returns to her parents' home. Sometimes the bride stays more than 3 days at home of her husband. The return of the bride to her parents' home is also somewhat of a festive occasion. I shall here copy some lines from my wife's diary, which describes the return of a bride among the Miao after staying at the bridegroom's home for 12 days. Took Rosie to see a bride returning to her mother's home. A group of 7 or 8 young women dressed in their best, and with flags made of red and green paper, were waiting in a little hill for her arrival. After waiting a long time, we saw the bridal party approaching. First came 3 men, and then 6 men carrying 3 slaughtered pigs on poles. 1 man carried 2 large baskets of cotton swinging on a pole, and another man carried 4 jackets and 4 skirts in the same way. The bride wore a crown, a magnificent piece of workmanship, ribbons, birds, flowers, and filigree work, all made of silver. Around her neck she had 7 silver necklets, some large and so-odd-looking and some very prettily worked. She had also 7 or 8 bracelets on each arm, and silver spangles all over that part of the jacket that was not embroidered. She also wore a richly embroidered skirt. Mrs. Pan told Meth dress and silver ornaments were worth at least 130 Mexican dollars. When she came in sight, the young women and some girls went to meet her, and she asked them to go before her to her home. When she arrived at home, 2 women stood just inside the door, 1 on each side, with a pot and a small cup. I think all the guests were offered whiskey, but I only saw the bride drink it. Inside were many guests assembled who were drinking. Some of the schoolgirls came in to see me during the evening, all of them smelling of whiskey. The feasting, singing, and gambling went on all night and for 3 days. I saw some of the women quite tipsy. After returning to her home, the girl remains with her parents till she is sent for by her husband's family, which usually happens at sowing or reaping time, when there is much work to be done. When sent for, the bride goes to her husband's home without any fuss, takes her place in her new home, and does her share of the house and farm work. Sometimes, if the husband or husband's family are not satisfied with the bride, they do not ask her to return, in which case she gets married to another man. Among the Hua Miao it is the rule not to send for the newly married till she has had her first baby. Not only do the Miao sing and recite the old legends in verse, handed down from very early times, but they are also, or at least some of them are, great storytellers. Some of these stories I took down from the dictation of my Miao teacher. They are not like Chinese stories, which are moral or immoral, mostly moral. Miao stories are not moral, but if we should say they were immoral, it might suggest a wrong opinion of them. We might, I think, call them unmoral, for they do not teach or illustrate the beauty of filial piety, loyalty, truthfulness, or any other moral excellence. In their stories 1 or more persons are clumsily crafty, and other persons are preternaturally simple. It is the crafty or lying people who always come off best, to the confusion of all honest and simple folk. That sort of thing amuses them immensely. Some of their stories profess to explain in an amusing, if not satisfactory, way how certain things happen to be as they are. We have mentioned already how the Miao explain why they have no written characters, and why the sun rises when the cock crows. We shall now give a couple of short stories told to explain certain facts in natural history which may interest our readers. The dog, the cat, the rat, and the sheep. Once upon a time the dog and the cat agreed to be cousins. The dog said, "Wet wahave now agreed to be cousins, there must be no sthng between us." The cat reft. "Wes hall steal other people's things, we two are kinsfolk, how can we rob one another, asterisk. Not long afterwards the dog took off his horns, and putting them on one side, stooped down to lick the inside of a stone mortar. In a little time he straightened himself, looked around, and not seeing his horns, said to the cat, "Have you seen my horns?" The cat replied, "I have not seen them." I certainly do not look after your horns for you. The dog searched everywhere, but could not find them, and meeting the rat, he asked if he had seen them. The rat answered, I know where they are. Well, said the dog, you tell me where they are. The rat replied, your cousin the cat has stolen your horns and put them in a cupboard. The dog went to the cupboard and found it was shut, so he said to the rat, you carry it in and bring them out for me. The rat inquired what reward he should get for doing this, and the dog replied, when I eat anything, you shall eat with me. So the rat gnawed a hole in the cupboard and dragged out the horns with his teeth. Was doing this, the cat saw him and snatched them away. The dog thereupon pursued the cat, and the cat made off to the top of a tree. The dog at the foot of the tree cried out, beat him one. The cat at the top of the tree said, I'm not afraid. When it was dark, the dog went home, and the cat, coming down from the tree, gave the horns to the sheep. And now the cat worries the rat, and the dog used to chase the sheep and bite them. So instead of friendship there is enmity between them all, because of things that happened long ago. The swallow and the toad, in old times the rice plant bore grain from the bottom to the top of the stalk. This just suited the swallow, but the toad did not like it. It would be well, said he, if instead of one harvest in the year there were 3 harvests per annum. No, said the swallow, it would be better if 1 harvest yielded enough for 3 years. That, objected the toad, would be very bad. How would it be very bad? Asked the swallow. Because, replied the toad, the ground would be overgrown with weeds, but urged the swallow, the weeds would be very convenient, we could rest in the shade of them. You only think of yourself, said the toad. Well, asked the swallow, how would it be bad for you? I prefer, said the toad, that there should be 3 harvests every year, thus there would be no weeds, and the snakes would not be able to seize me. The swallow, however, would not agree to such arrangement, and so they quarreled. You go, suggested the swallow to the toad, and make an accusation against me. Accuse you? Cried the toad, yes, I certainly shall go and accuse you. The swallow thought the toad would be a long time on the road, so he said to the toad, you go first. I'll come along at my leisure. The toad, however, was clever. He took a piece of wood and threw it in the water, and getting upon the piece of wood he floated quickly down with the stream. In this way was the first to arrive before the king. The king asked him what he came about, and the toad replied, I have come to make ye an accusation. Concerning what matter? Inquired the king, do you wish to make an accusation, I desire, said the toad, that there should be 3 crops every year to supply the year's need. The swallow will not agree to his, and says he prefers that 1 year's crop should suffice for 3 years. I say that thus the ground would be overgrown with weeds, and the snake would come and eat me. So we quarreled over it, and the swallow beat me. Thereupon the king allowed the claim of the toad that every year there should be 3 crops, and the toad returned to his home. Later on the swallow, having delayed and amused himself on the way, arrived. The king asked him, what have you come about? The swallow replied, I have come to make an accusation. Concerning what matter? Demanded the king, do you wish to make an accusation? I desire, said the swallow, that 1 harvest should suffice for 3 years. The toad will not consent to this, and he beat me, so I have come to accuse him. But, said the king, the matter is already decided. You will find it recorded here. You can read it, the swallow, seeing the toad's claim was allowed, kept on protesting, whereupon thinking with his hand hit the swallow on the top of the head, and ever since the top of the swallow's head has been flat.